Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our next installment, our next panel for the HWA's fundraiser Halloween in July. You're live with our cook-off with the agents, which is why I'm in the kitchen. No, I'm just kidding, really. I am very excited to be here with three world-class agents: Alec, Shane, Becky, LeJune, and Maeve MacLysaght. And we are going to, they're going to talk about the do's and don'ts, what ages look for, all that kind of fun stuff. So without further ado, I will give the stage to them and let cooking begin.
All right. It's funny. This isn't actually a first for me, ladies. I'm not sure if you've ever just like let three agents in a room unbridled like this just to kind of do whatever the hell we want.
I told them there's not going to be any dearth of conversation.
No, definitely not. But again, usually it's like a panel and they're asking us questions, we're answering them, but now we're just kind of doing it. We can finally, I guess, let loose, footloose style. So it's nice. Oh yeah, I guess for those out there, I guess maybe quick introductions, and then we'll kind of just see what happens. Again, I'm Alec Shane. I'm at Writer's House. I've been there since 2009. Started my career assisting Jody Reamer, who represents Stephanie Meyer, the Twilight franchise, Ali Condi, John Green, Tahara Mafi, Ransom Riggs, a lot of really big YA titles. But I've always been a horror nerd, and so I kind of found the niche, repping a lot of horror titles at Writer's House. I now rep HWA, and I'm psyched to be here.
I'm Becky LeJune. I've been working in this industry in one way or another for over 20 years now, which is a little shocking to me. I started working at the agency as an assistant and a reader, and then started taking on my own clients. There's just two of us, and it's kind of nice. I represent a lot of genres that Sandra, who started the agency, does not represent. For example, horror, speculative fiction of any kind, mystery, suspense, thriller. She does some mystery. Yeah.
I'm Maeve MacLysaght. I'm an agent at Cops Literary Services. I've been on the agent side since 2019. I started at a remote agency, which was very cool in 2019, and then the pandemic started 3 months later, and everyone was like, nope, that's not cool anymore. But yeah, so everyone at the agency honestly does different things except for horror. We all cross over in horror for some weird reason, but I'm very age agnostic. I'm pretty genre specific. I go everything from middle grade through adult and graphic novel, largely in the sort of sci-fi, speculative, horror, rom-com, any sort of genre space. I was always such a weenie growing up. My best friend watched horror movies constantly, and I would sit there with my video game in front of me for 120 minutes, and the one time I would take it down to like go to the bathroom would be always the scary face every single time. And so I thought I was such a weenie, and then I started actually acquiring my lists, and I've just been, I just love it. Just want a ghost and everything, you know?
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know, Becky, are you also a horror movie nerd, or is it more books for you?
No, both. I've been, I joke and I tell my parents it's their fault, but they said that they brought me to see Return of the Living Dead when I was a baby at the drive theater. My mom was like, no, you were asleep the whole time. And I was like, that's what it started.
So scary.
Wow. How about you, Maeve? How did you come into horror?
I never thought that I liked horror because I was subjected to so much of it from my best friend growing up, and I'm scared of it. Like, a spooky soundtrack will get me. The beginning of Castlevania was too spooky. A very
NES game, Castlevania?
Just like a minor key, and I'm like, absolutely not. I'm gonna be murdered in my bed tonight. And then I wrote 2 different theses in college and for my master's about monsters, and I was like, never mind. I think you actually do like horror. I just come at it. So yeah.
That's awesome. You know, it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned jump scares, because I feel like a lot of, maybe we should probably, I could talk about horror movies all day, but I guess this is like a book talk, so maybe we should probably talk about books here. I don't know about you two, but a question I get a lot in the horror specific kind of writing field is like, what really makes something scary? And the big mistake I find a lot of authors are making is like a gross out contest, or they want to have like, they want to try and manufacture a jump scare in a book, which I think you can do, but it's much easier to manufacture a jump scare on a screen versus you're walking and then the next paragraph, boo, kind of a thing. So maybe I'll ask each of you, I'll be curious to know your perspective on what really makes something scary for you when you're reading.
I think if the author is writing about things that scare them, that usually comes through in the writing. And that's, I mean, I have things that scare me personally, but for the most part, I just enjoy reading horror. And I think it's most effective if the author is writing from their own emotional space.
I think I'm very similar in that jump scares are really easy to manufacture on screen because all you have to do is just a very quick cut. But the thing that you don't get on screen that you can do, and what makes books really sing in this space, is that you can get into that sort of really deep psychological stuff that doesn't happen on screen because there's nothing there. There's nothing happening. You're just sort of sitting there thinking about things or sort of reacting to your world. And so I think that the thing that has really drawn me to horror right now in particular is that we're getting a lot more stories being told by people who are not straight cis white men, because what scares straight cis white men is largely their mothers and women, but what scares everyone else is straight cis white men. And so I think that we're actually getting to, there's nothing that breaks the horror for me more than something will happen on screen and then there will be a jump scare 5 pages later, and I'm like, the thing that scared me happened 5 pages ago and you thought that was normal, and that scares me more than the jump scare. So yeah, I think really, really deeply embodying your characters and understanding how they move through the world and why they would react to these things. It's actually been very interesting because I do a little bit of middle grade horror, and thinking about horror from a kid's perspective is so different because I was repping a book that was about these like 2 twins that are getting followed through the woods by their doppelgangers. And there was a point where I was reading it and there's like they're sunbathing somewhere and there's like 2 little feet, you can see them sticking out of the woods, so someone's watching them, and I was like full ass adult in the middle of my office in the middle of the day, like sweating. I was so scared, and I was like, I don't think this is okay for kids. And then I realized that like that's not what scares children, because children are always surveilled. They should always be surveilled, and they get uncomfortable when they're not surveilled. And so the thing that was scary to them was the like parents being removed, the sister bond being removed, being alone at night. But just having people watching them was not fundamentally scary in a way that it is for an adult. So
yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I mean, it's so you have a question. Awesome. We'll get to that. I think really your point maybe about characters, I think really hits home. I think anytime there's somebody that you care about and something bad happens to them, that's just inherently terrifying, right? There's always these awful things happening like every 2 seconds in the world, and we can't keep up with like the tragedies that are happening in the world. But like your little brother's in the hospital, and that immediately takes precedent over all of it, even if he's just like as a precaution. And creating people we care about, it really, really does matter with the horror stuff. But I'm glad we can get the questions so we can ramble about that all day. What is your process for working with authors from submission to publication? How frequently do you communicate with authors during this process? I think everyone's pretty different, I imagine. I mean, every author I know is very different. And I'm not doing horror. I personally work with a fair number of veterans and military authors. And how I treat and talk to them are very different than, say, my literary fiction authors, who are a little more finicky and precious. I enjoy veterans. I can be like, dude, this sucks. Go fix this immediately. And they're just like, yes, sir. And they go fix it. If I said that to some authors, I'd never hear from them again because they'd be on an island somewhere living in a tent. So I think it really, for me at least, depends on how the author best responds to me and my feedback. And my communication really varies author to author.
Same. For the most part, I update all of my clients on where we are in the process, who's reading. I forward them emails from the editors as they come in, not out of office emails, but I haven't gotten to it yet, or definitely feedback emails. But that can be a little bit of a slow period. You get a bevy of responses at the beginning, and then you're just waiting for people to read. So it's just kind of whatever the individual author prefers. Some really don't want to hear from me until there's news, and some need a weekly check-in just to make sure everything is okay. So
yeah, same. It's very much what we can control is a very small portion of what the whole publishing process is. And so when I have stuff to say, I will say it. And when I don't have stuff to say, which is most of the time, I don't particularly check in. I personally don't actually, Becky, send all the feedback just because I find it depressing. Like
it really is.
It's so depressing, and it often has nothing to do with the content of the author's writing. It's totally fit. It's totally timing. It's totally the list. Sometimes we'll just send things out and they'll say, actually, I've pivoted and I'm not doing that anymore, which is perfectly fine and has nothing to do with you. But I find that it can throw off a writer's schedule so much to just get random rejection in the middle of the day. So I personally try to save all of my rejections for batches of 2 or 3, so I can say, hey, now we're at X percentage of the list, or at X percentage of the list, nobody said anything revolutionary, or everyone said that they hated this character. Now we should actually do something about this. But yeah, it's totally up to author communication styles. I also have authors who are like, tell me everything the minute it comes in, or they're like, don't email me. I've been under a rock for the last 6 months. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
I have one client, I should call him out by name because he's on a lot of podcasts and always calls me out by name, but he was about to interview for a job when I sent him a rejection. And I was like, why did you read it? Like, yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because I think we being on our side of it, there are certain like buzzwords and editors speak for like, no, this is a no flat out. But they don't say no flat out. They're like, thank you for sending this. Here's like 3 really nice things about the manuscript. Unfortunately, I didn't connect with the voice, or I didn't fall in love with it, or I can't position it, or I have something similar on my list. Those are all just means no. And you forward that to an author like, oh, we got so close. We should revise it. And like, no, we shouldn't. Maeve, to your point, though, sometimes you get like 6 passes and all 6 are like, this character didn't work, or the ending really didn't work for me. And then you can kind of send those all back at once and we can revise and go back into it. So yeah, it's really hard to say. We get the question a lot. I'm guessing, what's your process working with authors? I always joke that I don't know if you're the same way, but I know things about my authors like that their spouses don't know. It's a very different, weird relationship, and that obviously it's business first and foremost, and it's a business relationship, but it goes much deeper than that, especially the longer you work with these people, because they're letting you into their world and they're handing their baby over to you literally, and they're like, here, sell this. And sometimes we can't sell it, and a lot of times we can't sell it. Who are we kidding? And it's just a very interesting relationship. And I think which is also a question I always throw back to authors is, I know the agent hunt can be very daunting and difficult, but it's not just like finding an agent that says yes. It's finding an agent that like you want to be married to in a lot of ways, like sharing your vision, that phone call. Do you have the same editorial feedback in mind? Do you get along well? Are you dreading talking to them? It really should be a symbiotic relationship. I think a lot of times authors, they get so desperate for an agent that they get an offer, and even if it's not really the right fit, they take it anyway, and it never ends well.
That's actually, I find that a lot of panels will talk about like, rejection feedback and why do you not get back faster and why do you not get back more detailedly? And, it's part of it is that, our authors come first and foremost, our clients come first and foremost. So anytime that we're reading queries is times we're not doing work for our authors, the people with whom we have a fiduciary relationship. But I also find that for me, honestly, I have been, as I've grown in my career, I've been giving less and less editorial feedback as I pass on things, because the point of me passing is that I didn't have the vision for it. And so, there are some very standard things that everyone can work on. Craft isn't there, dialogue isn't there, there's grammatical issues. Those are the things that we lost Alec.
He's like, I'm out.
Yeah, no man. Those are the things you can fix. And everyone can fix across the board. But if it's going to be something like, this character really rubbed me the wrong way, or I didn't like that the stakes weren't working for this person, I don't have if you revise it for me, I've already said no, and somebody else might say, I loved those things, don't change it,
Yeah. I got myself into a bit of trouble in the beginning because I wanted to help everyone. I wanted to send, actionable feedback to everyone, and very, very quickly started drowning. So
yeah, I mean, there's isn't time in the day. I think one of the biggest, and I don't know how to fix it. I always hate people that point out all the problems and offer 0 solutions to anything, but they're just, the way publishing is structured, like there just isn't literally enough hours in the day for us to read everything that we get in and provide individualized feedback on it. And something has to give. And unfortunately, it's the uneducated author, because we're not officially working together yet. And so a lot of it is free labor. And it's conversations that are happening right now that are really interesting. But I have 0 idea how to fix it. So I try and keep my mouth shut and my ears open right now.
I think the way to fix it is just remembering that nothing in publishing is personal. Like it's, again, the passes that we get are going to be not a good time, not a good fit, it's exactly the same thing. It is not, we hate you. It is not, nobody is seeing your work, which I know that it can feel like after a while, but remembering that nothing is personal, I think is helpful.
For sure. Another question in here says, how do you vet an author when you're considering working with them? And what would you like to see in an author that makes them easier to represent? That's a good question.
Authors that are open to feedback. I think one of the things with my process tends to be that I want to see something that's in progress so that I can provide some sort of feedback so that the author can see what my feedback looks like, so that they can make an educated decision themselves and decide whether or not we can work well together. And it's my way of sort of like, okay, can they handle feedback? Are they going to be open to making these changes? Because if they're not open to my feedback, which is probably not going to be as bad as an editorial letter, then they're going to be very hard to work with from that side too. So that's sort of part of my vetting process, but I also think it's important for the author in terms of their vetting process for me as well.
Yeah, I also always offer my editorial feedback. In terms of, I know this is the unpopular answer, but I do check people's Twitters. I do make sure you're not being a dickhole on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's very important. Plenty of authors have been getting in trouble for, not being in a kind of mutual relationship with their readers. I come at this from old Tumblr days and like earlier than that fandom days. And so I'm a pretty hard line on being a responsible human being on the internet. So I will always check that. But yeah, I think editorial feedback is probably the biggest thing. And that actually, honestly, is why I don't particularly, agents also have to compete with each other when we go up against each other for beauty contests over the same author. And I never really begrudge anyone winning that because it means that my feedback and my vision wasn't the thing that, won it in the end. And, like your point, we're going to lose a lot of projects. We're not going to sell a lot of projects. And so you need to trust that. I think my second project that I ever went out on sub with, author was great. We had this, I made him do this massive revision. It was 190,000 words and we got it down to 150, which was still TMTH. But I read it 4 times and it still slapped. But I read it so many times and we did this huge edit and we sent it out and it was his dream editor got back within 2 weeks to be like, oh, I hated all of the things you changed. And it was the most crushing feedback to get in the first thing with my first relationship. And I'm still working with that author because he trusts me. And I think that's very important, Yeah,
it's tough when an author, again, the author works so hard for you and they do everything you ask of them and they do it brilliantly. And you read it for the 5th, 6th time, because we all have to. And they've done it all and you still can't get a yes. And I think a lot of authors think, oh, I have an agent. Publishing, here I come.
Yeah.
It's tough out there. I don't know. I don't have a percentage record, but I mean, I know we all have books that we absolutely love that we cannot sell for the life of us. And we're watching these crappy books hit the bestseller list. And we're like, what the hell is wrong with the world? But that's just publishing. I think probably the most important thing I would take away from anything publishing related is I don't know if I should say this. It's a secret of the industry, but nobody has any clue what they're doing, including me. Hand up. I have no clue what the hell I'm doing. I don't know what's going to sell, what's not. I don't know what's trending, what isn't. I don't know what moves books in the marketing department. I have no idea. And maybe you two do, and please fill me in if you do. I am completely clueless as to what works in publishing.
I think if nothing else, the Big Listiculous Wolfwood scenario taught us that nobody knows. Nobody knows. It's just a random sauce that appears one day. That's the thing I often get, and I've been getting fewer of them. I think either because I've been aggressively myself on the internet or because people are getting smarter than this. But I used to get a lot of queries that were like, I have the next bestseller. And you're like, if we had the formula, we would do it. It would be great to not be working for free. If we had the formula, we would absolutely do it. But it is nothing. Publishing is so weird because stories are fundamentally so strange, and they touch different people in different ways. And what appeals. There's tons, actually. I was thinking about it the other day. I don't know if any of you have seen The Menu, the Anya Taylor-Joy movie. What a masterful, absolute whiff on marketing. Because I have never seen it, but I think it is absolutely my vibe because I thought it was going to be a boring court procedural, and all the people who watched it were like, this is too scary for me. And so, that thing of this could have been the right fit and somehow wires got crossed. And if it can happen at the level of a huge blockbuster movie, it's happening with books all the time.
I mean, we've all seen it. I've been going through a big, massive reshelving project at in my own house, and I've been unboxing books that I read years ago. And I was a bookseller, and I came across a book that I just absolutely loved. And I remember the marketing that the publisher put behind it, and I remember the display, and the book just bombed. And I thought it was fantastic. So it's just, even when it gets to the publisher, there's still no way to know if it's going to hit with readers.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Biggless Dickless, which is a great example. And then there was that woman last year who tweeted that nobody came to my book signing. And then like Stephen King and like Neil Gaiman retweeted it, and CNN picked it up. She sold like 15,000 copies of her book. So probably the most effective marketing campaign of 2022 was nobody showed up to a book signing.
Yeah.
So, and here we are trying to sell books that are not coming out until 2025. And we have to figure out what the market's going to be in 2025. So authors, if you're listening, just like write something you're really excited about and find an agent who's also excited about it. And you can both just flounder around in the dark together. That's kind of what agent authors do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I call it screw me into the void.
Yes, it really is. It really is.
I feel like I don't want to dominate the conversation here. So someone else wants to, I don't want to be like that guy that just like takes over all the time. I'm not sure if anything you want to talk about, but
I mean, I feel like you're doing fine. You're kind of guiding it.
Okay. All right. I just want to be like, as one of the opening points is like, everyone's terrified of cis straight white dudes. As the guy who's like out of central casting, as like the guy the girl's dating before she meets her love interest, I don't want to like be that guy. So I'm happy to keep going, but I'm checking that. All right. So I guess we should probably talk more horror. I guess we can probably do the intersection of craft and publishing and horror. I know horror's been kind of like hot for a while now. It's kind of had a revival. It was away from, but horror movies are big and people are really liking horror. I guess to be more specific, is there any particular you're either looking for in the horror genre, a horror novel you'd love to find, a horror plot you'd love to find, anything along those lines for aspiring author there if they can query you with them?
Yeah, this is something that I have to stop telling middle grade people. I keep telling this to kidlit people and then their eyes glaze over and I'm like, never mind, I also like sparkles. I love barber surgeons. They're so fucked up. The history of our medical situation is like very interesting to me, and the fine line between like most of them were drunk and most of them also read a single book written by a Puritan who never actually touched a person, were also all of our doctors and dentists, is like wild times. Anyways, but yeah, I think that I'm getting very excited about the fact that we're getting a lot of like fully orchestrated horror. There's a lot, and there always has been a lot of that sort of like slow droning, you know, if there's a soundtrack, it's a single tone repeated forever kind of horror, which is fine and fun. But I think that like the Jordan Peels of the world are like bringing very cool and very full horror. I really like horror that I think it was actually watching Us that I watched in a theater. And speaking of sort of characters that you fall in love with and care about, I also really like horror movie characters that you just can't stand. And the entire movie theater decided that the husband in Us was just the worst human being and just such a waste of space, just by the fact that he's very charming.
Him.
I know, he's so charming, but everyone was like, get in the fucking boat. Like everyone was shouting at the screen. It was so much fun, and it was still terrifying. But like we were having this like, I don't know. I think it's very easy to scare someone in a vacuum, and it's very scary to scare someone when the lights are on and there's people around you. And some books can really get that going. Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. Yeah. Dead Silence is the no, it is Dead Silence. S.A. Barnes. I was right. Did an incredible job of that. It's essentially like the Firefly movie Serenity if it had actually been done well. But yeah, they did a really good job of that. It was one of those books that you want to like turn sideways so the scary words don't get you.
I had I don't even know. I mean, I'm just looking for things that I like. I like folk horror. I like slow burn horror. I like so many different things. I will say very often horror does not leave me feeling unsettled or scared. Adam Neville's No One Gets Out Alive was the last book that really like freaked me out. I was reading it while I saved it. My husband went out of town and I was like, I'm gonna read it. And I had to put it down. I couldn't read it in bed. I had to put it down. And that was very, that doesn't happen very often. So yeah, just horror that hits.
I'm reading Whale Fall right now by Daniel Kraus. Like that's like right up my alley. Guy gets eaten by a whale. His oxygen's running out. He's an hour to get out. That is just like right up my alley. Awesome kind of book. I'm like, what scares me? We talked about, I think, right, what scares you. And one of the things that always scares me is like not knowing what I would do when like the shit really hits the fan. Like we can all say what we think we do when the burglar comes in the house or like when the riots start, but like you never really know, and you can't know until you're actually in it. So people that kind of get put in those extreme situations, those Jack Ketchum kind of off-season kind of things, I really enjoy. So that's what I'd love to see on my own personal list. I got a couple questions.
I actually think that's a good thing to think about in terms of people who just want to do like infinite slasher. Doesn't work super well in book form, but I think making you very aware of your body is something that's very, so like, you know, you're stuck in a whale and you have X amount of oxygen and you are really running out of it. Like the lung, not a particularly scary organ, but if you think about the fact that you're running out of oxygen, very scary. The lumen is dead. You figure out within 30 minutes, you're like, I've never been more aware of where my intestines are while I'm reading a book than right now. And like that awareness can be very scary.
100%. I think I read somewhere it's like every time you take a breath, you reset your own death clock, which I think is just like, it's true. You do. And stuff like that. So yeah. All right. How do you approach selling books that mix genres like horror, romance? Let's see. Horror, like, all right. I think a big part of our job as agents when we're selling to editors is like, who do I pitch this to? As you're reading submissions, like I always, when I'm reading, I'm always like, all right, I can see so-and-so reading this. I kind of have my mental submission list and like, how do I pitch it? Where does it go on the shelf? Because the number of times, I don't know about YouTube, but the number of times I've had an editor love a project, take it to acquisitions, and then the sales and marketing team did whatever they do on that Excel spreadsheet and they don't see a spot for it on the shelf. So how are you kind of figuring out how to pitch your projects when you're doing that?
I kind of imagine that it's the one sales or marketing person that's like, you know, we had that one book like 10 years ago that just didn't do well. So, and then they're like, okay, never mind.
I used to be in sales and marketing and I was that person. No, nobody knows. Nobody knows. They also are just making wild assumptions. I think there's a really fine line between everyone wants a new spin on something, but you also have to make a book that looks like a book. And I think that's it seems really obvious, but it's a kind of a fine line. And genre exists only as much as we've already talked about it. Marketing can be very effective or it can absolutely flop. And so books only sell when they know where they should go in the store. And so, you know, I feel like we're always retooling. This is folksy underwater sapphic mermaid romance. Like, you know, we're making up all these cool things to be like, yes, this stands out on the shelf, but we also have to know which shelf it's going to sit on. And a lot of that is knowing what the conventions of the genre are and whether or not it falls in that. So for instance, horror, romance needs a happy ending. Romance always needs a happy ending or else it has failed as a book in the genre, which means that if everyone dies at the end, that's a horror book with some romance in it. But if there's a happy ending and there's some spooky stuff, then that's a romance with some horror in it. And so I think that the biggest thing I always tell people is like, yes, everyone wants to have the newest idea under the sun, but you're actually writing for the endpoint user. It can feel like you're writing for your agent and you're writing for your editor and you're writing for a publishing house, but you're writing for an endpoint user, and an endpoint user walks into a bookstore and says, I feel like reading a romance novel today. And they're going to walk to that romance novel shelf. And so does your book look like the ones that are there? Is your reader going to be disappointed if they say, I want to read a romance novel today and everyone dies at the end? Versus, is it going to sit on the horror shelf and your reader goes, oh, this is surprisingly spicy and I enjoy this, you know?
Yeah, and it's also like as bookstores kind of close and shrink, the shelf space is getting limited anyway, you know? And so it's really, I think it goes back to the point we were making earlier about maybe write the book you really want to write and write what you love and don't worry so much about where it's going to go on the shelf right now. And then once you find your agent, maybe you can kind of figure it out together. The number of genres I've just made up because I didn't know where to put it. Like cli-fi is a thing now, and like dystopian became speculative and horror became like paranormal thriller, and there are all these different buzzwords you can use to skate around the cliches no one wants to see anymore, because it's a good book at the end of the day, for sure. Another question here is, how do you approach the sale of foreign rights, audio rights, or film television rights? Do your respective agencies have their own departments? I know, Becky, you're just a two-person shop, so probably not. You have your own audio person, but Maeve, do you have your own audio sub-rights person in town, or that's you?
That's me.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm the rights person.
Yeah, in terms of foreign sales and all of that, I myself.
I will say in general now, it's getting a lot harder as agents to retain audio rights, especially. Film TV is always retained. That's almost a non-starter. But foreign rights and audio rights, a lot of times, especially in the adult market, it's very hard to retain foreign rights because the publisher wants those.
Also, I think, also becoming more aggressive about acquiring world rights. And I think one of our jobs as an agent is to fight for rights when we would be exercising them better, and also to know when we should be letting them go to other people. I find a lot in graphic novel, I will let world rights go because they're having conversations and they're in rooms with very specialized people in a way that I am not. But if it's just it's straight up and down novel, I have those relationships. I don't necessarily, they have a list of 200 books. I have a list of 3, I'm going to put more time and energy into those. So yeah, I mean, that's what you hire an agent for. People always think about the first step, which is write the book, sell the book, but everything that happens afterwards, all the subsidiary rights, all the things that we do with them, that is not just sell a book, I think is the thing that brings value to an agent.
Well, and the most important thing too is sort of deciding which battles you want to fight. You're not going to win them all. So if you're pitching to a publisher that has their own in-house audio department, maybe you'd let that one go and you want to keep foreign rights instead. But you can ask, how aggressive are you with foreign sales? Do you have foreign distribution? Do you have somebody that's going to actually do this? And then there's always the sunset clauses, which are kind of, but
yeah, again, just a quick publishing 101. Obviously, if you just sell, usually it used to be, you'd take an editor out to lunch, you'd both get hammered, you'd pitch a book on the spot, and they'd buy it for $5,000, and you'd sell the paperback rights to somebody else, and every single right was split up, and now it's one big rights grab. But if you are able to only sell, say, North American rights to the publisher, you can sell audio rights to recorded books for more money. It's an advance up front you're going to get right away versus earning your advance back via those sub-right sales the publisher does. But yeah, I've had a couple of authors I've retained audio on because they're kind of grandfathered in because they retained audio back before it was cool. But I'm just having a really hard time retaining audio now because audio is so much more popular than it used to ever be. I was personally very worried when the pandemic hit that audiobooks would go by the wayside because no one was driving anymore. No one was going to the gym anymore. But audiobooks skyrocketed because they were all just sitting at home with nothing to do. And we all ran out of stuff to watch on Netflix 2 weeks in. So it's much harder to retain audio rights. But as agents, it is our job to try and retain as many rights as we possibly can, exploit as many rights as we possibly can. It's just, to Maeve's point, sometimes the book's very, very American, say, like a World War II hit. That's probably a bad example. An Afghanistan war, American sniper style, military memoir. Probably not a lot of Turkish rights sales for that, for example. So I'm happy to give world rights for books like that. So it goes project by project.
I was born in 1992, so I've never taken an agent out and sold
Neither. I got there at the absolute worst time. This is the 80s. I'm 42, but apparently there was once a time where that's how books were. The Jaws, for example, was sold for $5,000 at lunch, and they came up with the title at that lunch, and then eventually went and wrote it, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I'm the same age as you, Alec. That has not been my experience. Oftentimes I do wonder, oh man, what if I was doing this in the 80s?
Yeah, the golden era. Back when horror had its own section in the bookstores, and it's not just lumped in with John Grisham, a bunch of jerks. Anyway, what relationships do you have with publishers, and how do you decide which publishers to approach for a particular work? That's a big part of our job is kind of the schmoozing, networking, knowing who to submit to, doing the lunches, the coffee dates, the drinks outings, the conferences, the mixers. It's cool now in that publishing is no longer completely centered in New York, which I like. You don't have to basically be in or around New York to go to the lunches. You can do a lot of Zoom meetings, stuff like that. But, like I said earlier, when I'm reading a submission, if I'm not already thinking, who can I send this to? It's probably a red flag. So, I think probably the most important thing we offer as besides kind of managers of a career is just having the connections and knowing who to give what to. But it's tough though, because I feel like editors are always moving. They're always leaving. Imprints are always closing down. The number of times I've emailed to check out a submission and got I'm no longer there. So it's not just knowing who to submit to, but it's knowing like who's still alive in publishing, which makes it tough.
I think that's like the bulk of our job, really, because the thing is, I have been less and less editorial as I've gone on, though I love editing. That's one of my favorite things to do. But you can get a beta. You can get a beta reader. You can get reading partners. You can get a freelance editor if you really want to. There's a lot of parts of the job that are replicable outside of me, and the relationships I have and the vision I have and the way that I pitch it to people and the stuff that I know about people and what they're looking for, that is specific to me. And that's what an agent brings to the table. And so that, I think, is one of the more important and non-replicable part of our jobs.
No, it's true. Do you find, to that point, Maeve, like, I guess, you say you're doing less editorial work, as am I. Like, the amount of work I did earlier in my career, you just have more time, right? You have less people emailing you. It's just kind of the way it works. But are you looking for basically, like, as it comes into your inbox, it's ready to be sent right back out? Or are you still planning a couple of rounds of revisions at this point before you go?
I still plan on a couple of rounds of revisions, just because there's nothing that's ever going to be perfect. But I also find that I think it's kind of the opposite. It's not that I'm looking for things that are ready to go. I'm realizing what my value to things is. And so I always tell my authors that I would really like to see a project no more than 3 times at this point, because after 3 times, and I know that the authors have seen it more than 3 times and all of their readers have seen it more than 3 times, but after 3 times, I lose the objectivity to be like, is this good or is this just better? Or is this worse? Is it just different? I can't tell anymore. Versus the first time I read it through, I can say, okay, now, and not thinking about it from a craft perspective, thinking about it from a business perspective, this is where I had questions. These are where people are going to have questions. These are the things that look like other books, so you might want to consider changing them. These are the things that are very unique, so you should be pushing those to the front. And so after those 3 times, I kind of lose that objectivity, and I'm just like, I don't know, it's a book, man.
Yeah, authors are always asking me, like, when do I know when my book is ready to send out? Because I'm revising it so many times. Well, how do I know if I'm done? I always say, to your point, Maeve, I'm always like, when you get to the point where you open it up and you go, I have to read this thing one more time. If I have to edit this thing, I am going to kill somebody. I think that's when you know it's ready, because you know it still has a couple rounds with your agent and a couple more rounds with your editor, and then goes to copy editing, and it's still never going to be done. And you're going to get to your bookstore, you're going to pick it up, you're going to read a sentence, you're going to be like, crap, that's a horrible sentence. You're never officially done editing. But I think as agents, we have to be more editorial than ever, because it's got to be more or less perfect. I always say that, like, the agent has kind of become the editor, the author is now the agent, the editor is now the publicist, and the publicist is just like this revolving door of college graduates who get spit up by New York City and leave before they ever see one book through. So you really got to be on point from part of it. And this is a tough question here. How do you see the horror genre doing in terms of popularity, ability to sell books in the next 5 years? And how do you think the genre will evolve? It's a very good question, and I have absolutely no idea, because, as I've admitted, I don't know what I'm doing tonight, let alone 5 years from now. I hope publishing's still around in 5 years. I mean, who the hell knows?
It will be. We always do. Doomsday. We always do.
Yeah.
I actually entered publishing when it was in like 2016, when everyone was having the big ebook kerfuffle, where like ebooks were going to replace books. Everything is going to go away. There's not going to be any publishing. Books as and this is why I get my hackles rise every time anyone is like, we're disrupting the book industry. Books have largely not changed as a technology since we began printing them, because they are very inexpensive. They are a very good archival system. We can't read, and we still can't produce DVDs that were made 5 years ago. That's not a good archival system. We're reading books from the 1800s. Like, paper is great. And so I think people will always like stories, and people will always crave stories written by other human beings. And so I think we had a big kerfuffle about this, which is actually very interesting. So my girlfriend, when I first started working in publishing, was at the Penguin Random House contracts department, and there are contracts with moon rights in them, because they thought that was going to be the next thing, that people were going to move to the moon, and they were going to, oh no, now this is a new territory. So they were locking down those moon rights because they thought the moon was coming for the publishing industry. And then we thought the ebooks were going to come for it. We are obviously living in late stage capitalism, and we're seeing the value of artists diminished every day. But I don't think publishing is going away, because we love stories. It's just going to evolve. But I do think that, like, as much as trends are impossible to predict, because we are acquiring for books, like you said, in 2025, 2026, 27, we're working so far out, we can see the fact that, what's it called? Tor just started 2 imprints that are dedicated to horror and romance. That's a measurable dedication to the imprint and to horror as a genre. Do we see that from other publishers? I'm not sure. And if we do, then I think it's going to really like dig in and stay around.
And it's so cyclical too. Publishing is there's cycles. You know, there's a while you couldn't sell vampires. Now everyone wants vampires and angels, and I feel like it all kind of comes back around. So again, it all really comes down to if you're ever sitting down to write something, you're like, all right, what's trending right now? Don't just write something good. And yeah, books aren't going anywhere. Just like now that, you know, if you're really, I feel like it's kind of thing now, ebooks they kind of replace the mass market, where if you're just kind of maybe a casual reader, you want to bang through books, you have your Kindle, you have your subscription, you bang them out. If you really like books and you're a book nerd, you probably like a really nice bookshelf, have these beautifully produced hardcovers or trade paperbacks on your shelf. The same way, if you're like really like music, you now probably have a record player and vinyl records versus your playlist on Spotify, or a nice Blu-ray collection versus like Netflix or whatever. People still want pieces of art in their house in some capacity. So I think there will always be room for a nice, well-produced book. It kind of talks about who you are as a person, what your bookshelf looks like, I think. So it's kind of like part of your personality, provided that paper still exists. Paper is pretty expensive right now. I get a lot of questions. If you have like a thing about word count now being a problem because paper is so expensive to produce and print that people actually want shorter novels versus like the 90,000. Have you been hearing this at all about like they want shorter books because like the production cost of actual making the book is so high?
See, I'm the opposite. I'm the one that wants the shorter books. My attention span is infinitesimal. My attention span peaked at Vine and has just gone downhill since that 6-second sort of like snippet of greatness. Yeah, that's me. But I do think that is true. And I also think that it's interesting. Actually, we're seeing the melding of a couple of different genres, and this is a format issue as we change. Is we're starting to see people reading serialized online originally, which is very cool. And often this, again, back to sort of genre constraints and understandings, the word counts on those 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 to start, just a baseline. You can never get that through a publisher in the like traditional sense because that's really expensive to produce, but sometimes they do it. You know, the books that inspired the Untamed series are going to be like 10 books long and they're doing all of them. So, you know, sometimes it works.
I still stand by, I mean, obviously I started out as a bookseller, and it aggravated me to no end the decline of the indie bookstore, the rise of the big box, when the focus seemed to be more just like, we need warm bodies who can push buttons at a register. And to my mind, it's always been, books are inexpensive. Most people don't read voraciously like I do. You know, if they buy what now is like a $35 hardcover, they're going to be spending a significant amount of time with it. You know, you do get what you're paying for in terms of books. You can pay $13 and go see a 2-hour movie, or, well, depending on where you're going, $15. I don't know.
$30 in the Bay Area, man. It's about the price of a book at this point.
I usually go around lunchtime when it's cheaper.
Yeah.
So and I go to Alamo so I can have lunch with the movie. So. But anyway, if you have passionate booksellers, people who actually know the books and are recommending the books, I feel like it's not hard to get somebody to spend the money on a book. Because, like I said, they're going to get a significant amount of time out of it. And yeah. And then they have something they can go back to later.
I do regret the drop in popularity of the mass market, because, like, you know, to Shane's point, the ebook has become the mass market, which is great for accessibility reasons, but it does mean the late stage capitalism decline of value in IP, because like that's a $5 book. It didn't cost you $5 to produce that concept. You know, we should be hitting a price point that is accessible for the people who are going to be reading voraciously, but isn't dirt cheap, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of above my pay grade how to figure out how the hell to do that, unfortunately. Yeah, and it's funny. Like, I like ebooks, and now I think it's very powerful to be like, "Hey, Becky, check this book out." You'd be like, "All right," and like you press a button, and like you're reading it like 30 seconds later. It's nice to have that, especially with, to Maeve, to your point, the attention span of the world is shrinking ever so rapidly by the day. To ask somebody to put their phone down, stop streaming, stop swiping left or swiping right, and like spend $80 to buy like 6 books that are comprised of series. can be a big ask, because that's like 40 hours of reading you have to do. So in order to make them really kind of meaningful and powerful, it makes it very hard, and it's on the author and on the creator, unfortunately, to produce something that the world wants to read. But they always will. You authors always will. It'll never stop, and that's why we're here. Another question here: can you explain the typical terms of your agency agreement, including commission rates, duration, and other key details? That's a great question. Commission rates 15%. If anything less than that, anything more than that, huge red flag. Is industry standard. Every agent takes 15%. If you ever have to pay an agent anything, get out of there. That is also a scam. There's no reading fees, no submission fees. There's nothing like that. I don't know about your agreement, but usually my agreement is for the duration of the author's career. We sign them for the first book, but it's assumed that we go on forever. It's very easy for either side to terminate. You just do it in writing with 30 days. Sometimes it's a scenario where we represent any kind of sub rights for a book after it's been published, post-termination for an X amount of time. I don't think some clients have a book-by-book contract. I think it's agency by agency, but I think those are the ends. And anything I missed, the basics of agency?
Only thing 15% flat, 20% for domestic on anything that has a co-agent, just because there's another person who's splitting it. So usually that gets split between the agencies 10-10. But yeah, those prices are very standard. If the agent is a member of the AALA, the American Association of Literary Agents, they are bound by the canon of ethics to not charge fees. If at any point you have paid them for editorial work or for reading their thing, they have to refund you before they send your book out on sub. It can't be a term of sale, which has actually happened because some of the agents at my agency work editorially, and they've had projects that they're like, actually this is shaping up well, and they have had to refund their clients before they can take them on as agents. So yeah, those are definitely big red flags. I will occasionally do project by project, just because I do a lot of graphic novelists who are paired projects, and so they're not both my clients. It is like this project that is my project. But yeah, pretty standard. I want people to be with me because they want to be with me, not because they're screwed out of being anywhere else.
Yeah. Yep. Nonfiction times a little different. If it's like a celebrity memoir, like this person has one book in them and that's all they're going to write, which you see sometimes for some novelists, some books. But like, I'd like to think most agents sign authors as like a one-time thing, and you're together until you decide it's not working anymore. But again, as an author, make sure you read these contracts. If there's any, have a lawyer look at them. They're not set in stone. I've had alterations made for certain situations and certain parameters of different authors. So don't just sign it blindly. You are having a contract, and also you are paying us. We work for you. You are our boss. I know it seems the other way around, but we don't make any money until you make money. Every dollar you make, we get 15 cents of that. So I have clients that I have literally never made a dime off of, and I've been working with them for years, and that's fine because we have a relationship, and I'm happy to do it. And we're just hopefully front loading the work for when they become famous. Now they have like 10 books they haven't sold yet. We can put them in the pipeline. But, definitely you want to sign a contract. I know it's gotten a lot more corporate, for lack of a better term. A lot of older agents, like we're handshake agreement kind of people. I believe in contracts.
Wild.
Yeah. Like we have at Writer's House, we had some really famous authors back in the day who were just like, yeah, sure. There's nothing in place. So I'm sure every agency has those kind of legacy authors that were just like handshake agreements. But always make sure you sign a contract and you're comfortable signing it before you do.
I always stress to my,
oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I always stress to my clients, like, ask me questions. I want you to understand the contract. Now, whether or not they do is on them, but it's important to me that they know that I'm willing to explain, things that we can't change and why we can't change them, and change things that we can and work with them on that. And I want them to know what they're signing.
So that I would also say, if you're ever working on a project with another person, if you're collaborating, I love contract. I'm also the contracts person, so I love contracts. Sign one with your co-writer. There's nothing worse than getting halfway through. I come from the webcomic world where my favorite webcomics were stopped because they got into tiff over something and nobody had rights to continue it. So decide these things before it becomes a problem.
Everything's fine until they're not. And that's why contracts are important. I could be your best friend in the world. You could be lifelong friends. You still get a contract because you just never know. It's preparation for the worst case scenario. Another future question. All right. Maybe we can close with this. Where do you see the industry heading in the next 5 to 10 years? And how do we plan to adapt or lead this changing landscape? I don't know about at your agencies, ladies, but the big conversation around the author circle at Writer's House is like, what the hell are we doing with the AI situation right now? How do we manage it? How do we navigate it? They're doing AI covers. I don't know if you had that thing going around with like Mark Twain's latest novel. Have you read Mark Twain's latest novel? It's spot on. How are people navigating this new maze of AI? And it's changing so quickly that like by the time we figure out how to deal with like the latest brand, the Matrix is already advanced 5 feet forward. So we're kind of still figuring it out. I don't know if you had any real meaningful conversations about it, but I think it's going to be fine, because one thing AI can't do is like create original ideas. They have to derive their stuff from what already exists. So until they can become completely sentient, it's going to be okay. But that's the big conversation we're having right now, is what to do about AI.
Same, what language to add to contracts to protect our authors, that sort of thing. And then sort of how to handle if and when the publisher will and won't negotiate those. So
AI is a big one for me. I was raised by communists. I think there is fundamentally no ethical AI. There's a lot of magical thinking that goes into computers, and just sort of like, it's going to make a thing. And you're like, yes, but what is the material cost of physically running those servers and physically running that program? And also, what is the intellectual and cultural cost of saying anyone can write a book now? Anyone has always been able to write a book. It's very easy. It is, once again, a very low-tech thing to do. You need not even a pencil and paper. You could do it in your brain if you really wanted to, and maybe put it on an email. You could do it at the library. So I think that it is fundamentally unethical to be supporting AI in any way, shape, or form, other than very good math. That is what it is good at, very good math. Agriculture, medical services, spaceships, things that need really good math. Books don't need really good math. And art doesn't need really good math. And so I am very hardline on that. But yes, I think the thing about agents is that we're always going to be responding, just like the ebook, just like Moon Rights, we're always going to be responding to changes in technology and changes in the marketplace, and we're going to stay flexible on that. I think for me, what I think we're going to see a lot more in the next 10 years is collective action. I think we're going to start seeing more unions. We're going to start seeing more solidarity between artists and authors and actors, just like we're seeing right now, because we all live in a late stage capitalist hellscape. And so the only way to support art is to support all art.
Yeah, I guess one of the positives also, like there's no way you can really make money off an AI generated novel, because nobody owns the copyright to that. Yep. And so literally anybody can charge for an AI generated novel that has nothing to do about it. So if you're kind of one of those faceless corporations who wants to capitalize on profit, AI is not the way to get there for books, because there's no way to legally copyright it. And now, again, 10 years, 5 years from now, who knows? I think the only thing I can definitely say is we're always going to have authors. We're always going to need authors. We're always going to need books. We're going to need people who work in and around books and publish books. How that gets done, I don't know. But if you are a creative person with a great vision and some talent, there's a space for you in the pool, and we'd love to have you. All right, so we're kind of up at I don't know how long it's supposed to go. Well, we've been talking for an hour. This is the most unstructured and the best possible way, the most unstructured agent talk I've ever been in. Usually I'm kind of, we're restrained to whatever the topic of the day. It's been a lot of fun chatting with everybody. I don't know, maybe we can all like some parting words of advice, anything. I mean, and maybe also how to, what you're looking for and how to find you in terms of, querying and whatnot.
Yeah, you want to start?
Yeah, I guess I'll start again. So again, I'm ashane@writershouse.com. I'm pretty easy to find. I am on Twitter, although I don't like Twitter at all. I only use it for publishing related stuff. It's a miserable hellscape, even at its best. But you can find me on Twitter, MS Wishlist, Publishers Marketplace, all the places you can find agents. I'm there. I'm not close to queries. I'm never close to queries. I'm always looking for stuff. So if you think we're a fit, do some research and just say, I saw you talk at the How To with Agents, and it'd be great to hear from you.
Our website is bondliteraryagency.com. I am on Query Manager. I take queries through Query Manager, and you can find that link on our website. I do occasionally close to queries, and I may close soon because I have like 3,000 unread queries. But if I am closed, I always take referrals. I'm always open to people at conferences, things like that. So just reach out and ask. And eventually I will open again. So.
I'm at, well, you probably find me on the Cops Literary Services, copsliterary.com. I used to agent under a slightly modified version of my name, and my name is unpronounceable and untypable anyways. So if you follow one link, all the other links are, I have made it very easy once you get to that one thing. I just don't like saying my name out loud because how is anyone going to find that? Yeah, I'm on Query Manager. I take queries specifically through Query Manager. I close occasionally because I feel bad about how long I'm taking about things, but I am always looking for exciting stories. So I'm trying to close less, is what I'm saying.
I should close to queries. I just always forget to close to queries. And then I've also felt like I closed the queries once, but I got just as many queries as when I wasn't closed. I'm like, why am I even bothering closing to queries?
There's been several times when I've closed to queries, and then I've had very nice people email me to say, hey, I just sent in a query. I thought you said you were closed. And I was like, oh, thank you for telling me. You absolutely snuck in. This totally counts.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. What I tend to say is that I'm close to unsolicited queries. So, for example, people that I've met at conferences and things, I have special little links that I make for conferences that stay open. Yeah.
Well, awesome. I guess it's always really fun to talk to other agents because I feel like we don't really have to interact professionally because we should all hate each other and be competing for clients left and right, Hollywood style. But
oh my God, I gossip so much. I do not every, but almost every beauty contest I've ever lost to somebody, I've called the agent up to be like, you seem cool, we should chat.
Yeah, no, it is.
I think I'm broken. Nobody else will do it. Everyone else is like, that's pathological.
Like, we're not like Hollywood agents where we're all just like assholes who are just trying to like backstab and politic our way to the top of CAA or whatever. We're all just big nerds who like to read. And I don't really care. Obviously, I love it when I sell the book, but I'm just always really happy when a book I lose sells for a lot of money because it means it's out in the world. It's always really fun to talk to agents and commiserate on the state of the world and have some fun with it and realize that there's also a lot of hope out there and a lot of really exciting stuff coming for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Becky, Maeve, thank you so much for chatting with us. This is awesome.
Thank you.
HWA folks, thanks for organizing this. And for those who are here, thanks for joining in. I guess we'll close out.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody.
Good night,
Have a good night.
Bye.